I would like to welcome everyone to this third and final plenary session of Rethinking Marxism 2013, Surplus, Solidarity, Sufficiency, the eighth in the series of international conferences organized by the Association of Economic and Social Analysis and the journal Rethinking Marxism. The title of the session is A Conversation on Crafting Communism, and I'm Yahya Madra, a member of the editorial collective since 1998, and an associate editor from 2010 to 12. Even though I'm presenting the conversation, the idea of organizing a session with Jodi Dean and Stephen Healy, and exactly those two people, was Vin Leon Callow's, one of the co-chairs of the conference organizing committee. Together with Marcus Green, our new co-editor with Serap Kayatekin, a lot of couples there, Vin has done more than human amount of work in getting this conference together. I would like to thank them once again. It has been argued that the crisis of 2000 and the subsequent Great Recession, or as David Ruccio would like to call it, the Second Great Depression, has once again created an opening for injecting communism into the field of debate. This time around, it seems like it all started in Tunis, spreading from there to Egypt, to Tahrir, and beyond. When in the middle of February 2011 the protests began in Wisconsin, it seemed like a fault line was traversing the empire from Tahrir all the way to Wisconsin. On its way, on the northern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, oppositional vectors first joined forces with the ongoing uprisings in Greece, note the remarkable rise of Syriza there, and then produced a summer-long encampment in Plaza del Sol in Spain, and then came the Occupy Wall Street. But it's important not to reduce our narrative to the following formula. Capitalism falls into a cyclical crisis, the austerity measures create discontent, and uprisings happen. We can gain an additional insight if we recognize that the uprisings of this summer in Turkey and Brazil in particular are not simply because capitalism is in a crisis in these sorts of formations, but rather because it has been too successful. I say simply because I'm not so sure if capitalism is ever not in crisis. So, even if it's successful, it's crisis for some people. And people are taking it to the streets, defending their neighborhoods, parks, and campuses because they had enough of the social, urban, and ecological dislocation and contradictions unleashed by turbocharged capitalist development. They want neither the World Cup nor the Olympics. If you like, they're saying no to the spectacle. While having a significant degree of heterogeneity, these uprisings, beyond being connected virally, have a very significant common denominator. They seem to have chosen a horizontalist form of producing their revolutionary activity. It is not surprising that analogies are being made with the Paris Commune. Tahrir, Taksim, Zuccotti, Plaza del Sol, all these occupations have been self-organized communal efforts. Surely these communes are not nor writing for the humanities at Cornell University. Jodi is an immensely prolific writer. She has written 7 books since 1996. Solidarity of Strangers, Aliens in America, Publicity's Secret, Zizek's Politics, Democracy and Other Neoliberal Fantasies, Blog Theory, The Communist Horizon, and also her blog, I Cite. She's the co-editor of the International Online Journal of Contemporary Theory, Theory and Event, and collaborator with the Brooklyn-based collective Not an Alternative. She's currently working on a new book, Crowd and Party. Here, I welcome Jodi Dean.
Thanks. Is the sound all right? Yeah? Okay, so today I'm going to defend the idea of the party by setting out the conditions that make it necessary. Against left realists who claim that the party is an outmoded or fully saturated political form, that we are relegated to momentary acts of resistance or small reforms that leave the capitalist system intact, I argue that our conditions push us to rethink and renew that form of political organization through which communists think collectively about political power, act together in order to generate it, and inspire one another to use it for the collective determination of the world we produce in common. Capitalism pushes us apart. Left politics shouldn't do the same. Instead of emphasizing difference, it should assert and build commonality. The party is a forum for this assertion. For over 2 decades, scholars associated with rethinking Marxism have developed new ways to think about economic activity, production, distribution, and accumulation. They've investigated multiple micro-practices in a variety of domains, expanding our sense of what is economically possible. Yet who's the work for? And I don't mean this cynically. My point is not about getting tenure or rising in the academy. And my experience is that most of us who do radical Marxist and communist work are disciplinarily marginal. Now I ask the question who the work is for, because without something like a party, the work is for anyone who wants it, for anyone who wants to try something new. Creative economic alternatives become choices for small groups, initiatives some might take. They are thereby depoliticized into lifestyle choices, difficult to disentangle from a fetishization of the local that is simply a lower cost version of the 1%'s privatization, personalization, and enclaving in their repression of commonality. There are good ideas on the left. When they are disconnected from organized militant politics, however, they become absorbed into the flows of communicative capitalism, in Mimo Porcaro's words, an indeterminate mass of contradictory affirmations. They aren't oppositional. They don't provide an alternative. Without force behind them, they are just possibilities without possibility. Over the last 20-odd years, a left realism has taken hold of certain northern, western, US European left. At the site of a rethought humanist, culturalist, post-structuralist, post-Marxism is the foreclosure of revolution and the reduction of politics to critique, resignification, subversion, reform, resistance, and work on the self. Underlying continued aspirations for equality, real opposition to imperialism, racism, sexism, and homophobia is the sense that our working class is privileged, included, complacent. Radical politics happens somewhere else. It involves other folks. Since then, for the last 30 years of neoliberal consolidation, most activists and intellectuals associated with the left reject not just specific communist parties, but the very idea of the party as a forum for radical political action. Although some of the rejections repeat arguments found already in the split between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks, or part of a councilist or ultra-left political current, others situate themselves in a line of criticism prominent in the late 60s and early 70s. Rightly frustrated with a system the components of which buttressed rather than undermined capitalism, various voices on the left began to amplify one another as they targeted their critical energies on the mediating institutions of capitalist society: family, union, party, university. Insofar as these institutions made capitalism possible, that is, secured for it an adequate workforce and compliant citizenry, their abolition made seeming sense as a revolutionary goal. The party is but one of the institutions through which political energies are co-opted into the maintenance of the status quo, a critique which has been leveled at the Communist Party USA, particularly during the years of the Popular Front, as well as at the French Communist Party in '68, to give just 2 examples. Now, in the second decade of the new millennium, the mediating institutions of civil society have changed significantly. More people live alone than any time in US history. Fewer US children live in 2-parent families. Because of decades of anti-sexist and anti-homophobic struggle, even the mainstream accepts a wider array of living arrangements than were permitted 30 years ago. Union membership in the US is at its lowest level in a century. Wages have correspondingly stagnated and declined, decreasing the likelihood that blue-collar, service sector, and minimum wage jobs can lead to a middle-class standard of living. Left political parties have either collapsed or compromised. Max Elbaum's account of the new communist movement of the 70s tells this story particularly well, as it documents the setbacks facing US party builders at the time, their inability to regroup in the 80s, and the broadly demobilizing effects of the end of state socialism on activists who had been anchors of popular movements. The situation of the university is less easy to summarize, although it's clear that political commitment to public education, education as a recognized social good, that's declined. It's clear student debt has soared, and it's also clear that education is a key front in class war. Our current conjuncture differs from that of the 60s and early 70s, in that individuals are now more likely to encounter state and market directly, without the protection of mediating institutions. Instead of what liberalism renders as the force of law, individuals encounter force as law, whether directly as police or directly as market. Communicative capitalist ideology presents this immediacy as direct conversations between individual and company, as entrepreneurialism, as flexible contract-based work. It mystifies it as personal responsibility, choice, DIY, prosumption, the producer as consumer, and as opportunity for creative input. Privatization, offshoring, precarity, and the decline of unions have contributed to the loss of working-class jobs capable of sustaining a middle-class quality of life. Our culture is no longer mass culture. From personalized network media to 800-channel cable television, to the proliferation of sub- and microcultural consumption opportunities in the long tail of music, video, and writing available on the internet, communicative capitalist culture offers multiple, innumerable possibilities for expression, increasingly few of which register to any significant degree. Our politics is no longer mass politics. Mainstream electoral politics focuses so exclusively on fundraising that the more poor people support a policy, the less likely their representatives are to support it. Left politics has also shed the mass dimension of the 20th century, configured through contemporary capitalism's push to customize, specify, and individuate. Left issue and identity politics reduces action to raising awareness in the hope of generating an emotional response intense enough to inspire people to find out more for themselves, get involved, and make their opinions known. The left has mimicked and repeated in our politics the fragmentation, localization, and pluralization crucial to neoliberalism's dismantling of the welfare state. Even as capital has consolidated its class power and pursued a long-term strategy hostile to the rest of us, the left accepts and augments its dispersion into singularized individuals. Commenting on a text he wrote in the mid-'80s with Felix Guattari, Antonio Negri notes that the new organization of capitalist production in the late 70s produced a subjectivity locked in an insuperable contradiction, for social cooperation was more and more violently in opposition to the structures of capitalist control. Negri observes as well that even as he and Guattari recognized the importance of new technologies in networked communication, they didn't push their analysis far enough, and that they should have detected new possibilities for rebellion. I would add that they should have identified new forms of capture and subjection. Social media resolves and displaces the contradiction between social cooperation and capitalist control. Interacting through personalized, ubiquitous media, we leave traces that can be archived and searched, sold to advertisers, and turned over to security forces. We can connect with others, share our hopes and dreams, and reinforce capitalist control with the same clicks and links, likes and shares. We can be networked revolutionaries, courageously forwarding videos to all our friends. We can work on demand from home. Our mediated sociality affirms the structures of capitalist control more deeply and completely than the institutions of civil society ever did, especially under circumstances that amplify injunctions to individuality. More than the mythic rugged individualism of American frontier ideology, individuality is an economic element of communicative capitalism. Getting a job, a contract, an opportunity requires that one demonstrate that one is uniquely qualified in what one knows to be a dense and competitive field. As the market for middle-class jobs contracts, one has to stand out from the pack show that one is both a team player and capable of thinking outside the box, creative yet one of us. The entrepreneurial relation to self enhances the likelihood of education-related debt, as well as credit card debt accrued in the interest of looking the part, projecting the appearance of success, and supporting work done for free, like internships and volunteering. Capitalism's contradictions are interiorized in the form of the unique individual who is one of a multitude of singularities. Mainstream culture describes the structural effects of the amplified competition underlying the injunction to uniqueness as the winner-take-all or winner-take-most character of the new economy, the 80-20 rule, or inversely, the long tail. The basic idea is that any system characterized by free choice and preferential attachment will generate extreme inequality. Moreover, the larger the system, the larger the inequality, right? And the lottery is a good example of this, right? The bigger the lottery is, the less likelihood you have of winning it. The stimulation of the production of uniqueness, of individualities, produces the field in which the individual dissolves so that a winner, can emerge to claim the prize or get the job. And even as there is a long tail, that is, a vast majority of losers, right, those of us who are much closer to each other than we are to the one, communicative capitalism produces these losers not as a mass, but as a multitude of singularities, each holding on to its difference as its most valuable attribute, despite its fundamental devaluation with respect to the system. The genius of the slogan, "We're the 99%, is that it grasps this basic fact, names it, and occupies it. It recognizes the winner-take-all character of contemporary capitalism and makes it a crime, a wrong. In the face of dispersion, it asserts collectivity. Rather than a continuation of a left politics premised on cultivating a wide variety of issues and perspectives and then challenged to build affinities between them, Occupy asserted the economic division between the 99% and the 1% as the basis for a new movement. Although the amplified individualism of communicative capitalism is a change from the society of mediating institutions, it's not new. Marx and Engels note it already in the German ideology when they write, "Competition isolates individuals, not only bourgeois, but even more the proletarians, despite the fact that it brings them together. It takes a long time before these individuals can unite," end quote. Rosa Luxemburg similarly observes that the problem of social democracy in Russia was the atomized condition of the proletariat. Bourgeois society hadn't instilled in the working class the rudiments of political solidarity, end quote. It hadn't provided them the proper raw material, that is, the institutions, capacities, and expectations that would enable them to combine politically. Our conditions are also atomized, but differently. Ours is atomization as personalization, the atomization of the mobile, singular, and uncollected. In the US, we cling to individualism even as our ongoing proletarianization solidifies the gap between the 1% and the rest of us. We have individuality without political subjectivity, which can only ever be collective. In 2008, the left failed. There was a major crisis of capitalism, inviting urgent response, but the left was a no-show. The consequences have been more than bank bailouts and austerity. It's been the rise of the extreme right as the most visible opponent of neoliberal governmental policies. The same crisis continues to deepen, such that in the US, UK, and EU, there is now both a new normal of increasing and underemployment and intensifying inequality, and a fundamental uncertainty as to the terms and conditions of this new normal. We don't know what the new conditions that exceed the political economic settlements of welfare state and neoliberal state will look like. And this non-knowledge, this openness, is an opportunity for action. The space where we can push for one future rather than another, if we have the collective political will to do so. The crumbling of capitalist realism, right, the conviction that there is no alternative, has enabled ever more of us to see capitalism as the system of production through exploitation for the benefit of the few. But then what? It now seems that it's easier to imagine the end of capitalism than it is an organized left. Left realists insist that collectivity is undesirable and impossible. It's undesirable because it excludes possibilities, effaces difference, and enforces discipline. At the same time, they tell us that collectivity is impossible. We are so individuated, so singularized in our needs and ambitions that we can't ever come together. Coming together is in itself an illusion, a myth some of us use to manipulate others into fighting for our interests. Thus today, amidst the uncertainties of late neoliberalism, even when we are fully conscious of our own exploitation, the deep inequity of the system in which we find ourselves, we either don't feel like we can do anything about it, or we find ourselves participating in individuated, localized, or communicatively mediated activities without momentum, duration, or capacity for political memory. People are immiserated and proletarianized and practically confront this immiseration and proletarianization alone. We have to keep in mind, though, that isolation, immiseration, and political disorganization also characterized the early decades of revolutionary socialism. Marx, Engels, and Luxemburg all emphasize how competition means that workers tended to remain isolated, lacked solidarity, and take a long time to unite. Contemporary left realists one-sidedly emphasize the objective dimensions of our capitalist setting, failing to acknowledge the subjective dimension, always part of the Marxist tradition. There are, of course, significant differences between our time and the years of the early revolutionary socialism. Rather than a period of working class advance, ours is one of defeat. The rollback of the achievements of organized political struggle means austerity and privatization, particularly privatization accompanied by increases in brutality and exemption as practices formerly under public authority are turned over to personal power and the market. For us, authoritarianism is less that of a centralized state power than it is of a power decentralized, dispersed, and extended via private contracts, interbank and interagency cooperation, and the extensive network of treaties, agreements, and provisions enabling capital flow and global trade. We encounter the fragmentation, dissolution, and decomposition of some elements of the state, and the concentration and intermeshing of other elements of states and markets, as in finance, security, and media. So overall, we confront an uneven mix of centralizing and decentralizing forces in various combinations of state use of the market and market reliance on the state. Although the left failed in 2008, new possibilities were emerging as academics and activists turned again to the idea of communism. These possibilities have been amplified by the new cycle of struggles we've seen in Wisconsin, Egypt, Spain, Greece, Turkey, and the Occupy movement. Part of the new appeal of the idea of communism is that communism is the one word we have that bodes no compromise with capital and that asserts a powerful alternative. Linked to class struggle, the smashing of the bourgeois state, and the abolition of private property, communism is more than social democratic compromise, post-structuralist pluralization, and anarchist insurrection. Instead of a politics thought primarily in terms of resistance, playful and momentary aesthetic disruptions, the immediate specificity of local projects, and struggles for hegemony within a democratic milieu, the horizon of communism impresses on us the necessity of eliminating capitalism and creating global practices and institutions of egalitarian cooperation. It turns us away from lifestyle changes, general inclusion, and momentary calls for awareness, and toward militant opposition, tight organizational forms, and continued strategies for securing the people's control of the means of production. In contrast with anarchism's insistence on individuality, communism prioritizes solidarity. For Marx, proletariat names capitalism's self-creation of what destroys it. This what that destroys capitalism is a collective subject, a force no longer dispersed in individual and local acts of smashing, sabotage, and disruption, but concentrated in solidarity. But how then does this collective subject abolish capitalism? Not through destruction alone. The normal operation of the capitalist system is characterized by uncertainty and instability, a series of periods of moderate activity, prosperity, overproduction, crisis, and stagnation. Contemporary capitalism has refined its capacity for wealth destruction. Over $34 million of market value was lost in the financial crisis of 2008. According to Marx, the capitalist cycle of creative destruction is brought to an end by the proletariat, but not by the working class organized as workers. They're already organized as workers in the factory, which enables them to become conscious of their material conditions and the need to combine into unions. Rather, the abolition of capitalism depends on the organization of the class as a party, a solidary political association that cuts across workplace, sector, region, and nation. The working class as a class is implicated in the success or stability of capitalism. Capitalism configures its struggles with the bourgeoisie. The party, however, takes as its horizon capitalism's supersession in communism. The party is necessary because class struggle is not simply economic struggle, it's political struggle. Consider the famous passage from the German ideology. We call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of affairs. How should we understand this? Not as immediate insurrection, not as prefiguration, but rather as the expansion of voluntary cooperation. I say this because Marx explains that the conditions of this movement we call communism result from premises now in existence. The premises he's discussing involve the multiplication of productive forces through the cooperation of different individuals, as this cooperation is determined by the division of labor and not as an effect of people's own united power. Abolishing determination by the division of labor is a matter of self-conscious collective action, wherein cooperation isn't forced, isn't out of our control, but is instead willed commonly. Cooperation and concentration become self-conscious and willed rather than unconscious and determined. As the movement which abolishes the present state of affairs, communism expands this voluntary cooperation. In capitalist society, this expansion of voluntary as opposed to compulsory cooperation happens through a party. An organization premised on solidarity, the party holds open a political space for the production of a common political will, a will irreducible to the capitalist conditions in which the majority of people find themselves forced to sell their labor power. Where work is obligatory, determined, membership in the party is voluntary, the willed formation of united power. Among its members, the party replaces competition with solidarity. That class struggle is political means it exceeds the affirmation of people as workers with particular interests, extending to the critical assessment of this position as itself the result of inequality and exploitation. Differently put, the working class is a subject of capitalism. It is constrained within a field or discourse configured by and for capitalists as a class. It gets its position from within this field. So it might refuse and resist, sabotage and strike, but all of these actions are still configured within a field given by capital, configured for its interests and in its behalf. To be another kind of subject, the subject of another field, discourse or politics, requires a break or a twist, a shift to another field, the field of the party. The party is more than an outgrowth or extension of labor unions. It's a form for abolishing capitalism and ushering in communism. It occupies the place of division, holding it open for a new collective political subject. At different points over the past 100 years, the party has attempted to abolish capitalism and usher in communism in various ways. Revolutionary seizure of the state, participation in parliamentary processes, training of cadres and education of masses in order to be prepared when the time comes. The Communist Party has never been simply an organization aimed at achieving a set of economic reforms, aimed at themselves restraining capitalism's extremes and providing workers with welfare guarantees. That this is the case is clear when we note the justified sense of betrayal voiced by communists when their parties compromise and retreat. They feel betrayed because the party gave way on communist desire. The party is necessary because the people are split. We're split between the way we are given, positioned within capitalism. We're situated within a field that tells us who we are and what we can be, that establishes the matrix of our desire, but that represses the truth of this field in class struggle. The party asserts this truth, it speaks from this position of truth, and offers another field of possibilities, a discourse for another subject. In contrast, in opposition to capitalist desire, it opens up a terrain for the desire of another subject, a collective political subject. The party doesn't know everything. It provides a form for the knowledge we gain through experience and analyze from the perspective of the communist horizon. Now, this is very abstract and maybe pretty satisfying for people who want to know, like nuts and bolts, what kind of party do I have in mind? How will it be organized? How will such an organization in any way be adequate to our circumstances, given the way global capitalism is organized as a global financial system? Leo Panich and Sam Gendon are helpful here as they make explicit the inextricably political dimension of our current tasks. We can't change the world without taking political power. All we can do is pursue small experiments, the left version of the 1% skating themselves off. I'll add that we can't take political power if we lack political form. For the most part, our problem is less one of the organizational details than it is one of solidary political will. As the will emerges, people will figure out the structure in light of the challenges we face. Expanding militant pressure in ways that inspire and educate cadre, while at the same time straining the resources of the state and breaking the confidence of the financial sector. Abolishing private property and the capitalist banking system while advancing international coordination in an uneven environment. Increasing popular support and developing a program for addressing common concerns over the environment, health, transportation, communication, food, housing, and education. I think a 5 or 10-year plan would be helpful here. An alliance of the radical left, or better, a new communist party, could grow out of the concentrated forces of already existing groups, from militants skilled at direct action, to artists adept with symbols and slogans, to parties experienced at organizing, to issue groups knowledgeable about specific areas of concern. Such a concentration would let people who want to be engaged in radical politics but aren't sure what to do, it'll give them a place to go, a place to start. At the most minimal level, if we are to have a chance of taking power, of reformatting the basic conditions under which we live and work, we have to share a name in common as a fundamental marker of division. If not, our names will be given to us by capital, which will seek to fragment and distract us. In the movements of the last few years, we've seen recognition of the power and need for a name in common as a marker of division all the time. We are all Khaled Said, we are all Bostonians, we are all occupiers. Yet, across the spectrum of the left, people disavow this need for a name in common. In addition to needing a name in common, we need to know who we can trust, and we need to extend the bonds of trust beyond local ties and small networks. An absence of solidarity may be the biggest challenge right now, insofar as without solidarity, a common will cannot emerge. Defeat, betrayal, fear, as well as ongoing patterns of sexism, racism, and homophobia have made us deeply suspicious. One way a party helps deal with this is with explicit criteria for membership and expectations for members. Another way is through a cellular structure that ensures that each person is connected to a known group of others to whom she is accountable. And still another way is to acknowledge different skills and expertise by delegating tasks. We don't each need to know what every other person is doing. Trusting others' skills and knowledge is essential if we are to form ourselves into a political force capable of addressing global capital. It suggests the utility of working groups in multiple locales and issue areas, groups with enough autonomy to be responsive and enough direction to carry out a common purpose, which itself would have to be hashed out and to which all would have to be committed. So I've suggested a name in common and some basic structural components involving membership organized in cells, delegating tasks, and following a common purpose. The idea behind this rudimentary sketch is that the party is a political form of commitment, a solidarity requiring of members a willingness to put aside endless self-assertion and admit that pulling together is more important than insisting on one's own uniqueness. So I want to close actually with questions, by indicating a set of questions that I think the party form pushes us to answer. One, how do we imagine the world? Are we doomed to continue down a path determined for us? Do we take refuge in a left realist view that tells us that the time is not right? Do we conform to communicative capitalism's promise that another world is possible through an app? Or do we embrace uncertainty and do the impossible with recourse not to some kind of pure voluntarism, but to a recognition of the ultimately open character of the world in which we participate? Second, how do we imagine politics? Do we take for granted the political systems we have and position ourselves within them, repeating time and again the small moments of rebellion that let us sleep at night? Three, what do we want? Do we want an end of exploitation, the abolition of private property, a system of shared responsibility for production and distribution, or have the last 30 years sunk in too deep, filling us with doubt and making us suspect that, yes, it's true, there's no alternative to capitalism, let's just make it not so bad for people like us? Four, what is the relation between means and ends? What is the relation between the actions we design, the events in which we participate, the text we write and circulate, and the world we want to bring into being? What is the plan, the end game, the relation between actions over space and time? And five, and these are just five, there's many more, do we dare to avow power, to enact a political association that takes seriously and claims its partiality, that doesn't imagine itself as the whole of community or an idealized friendship, but that instead rests on fighting side by side against exploiters and for an egalitarian association of free producers?